like someone should be in here telling us when to. This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
Kevin Michael Duquette, and I live in Sandwich, Massachusetts.
How did you first end up on Cape Cod?
After I got out of the military, I moved back to Massachusetts. I was originally from Plymouth, and my sister lived on Cape, and my dad still lived in Plymouth, so to be close to both of them, I picked a spot in between.
Why did you decide to enlist in the military?
It was something that I always wanted to do.
How old were you when you knew that you wanted to be in the military?
First thoughts I had about being in the military, I think I had my mind made up around 13 or 14 years old.
Did anyone inspire you to join the military?
Yeah, my father and my grandfather were both in the military, so I just kind of followed in their footsteps.
When you first enlisted, how did your family respond?
They were kind of... My dad just was concerned because there was a war going on when I joined in 1991. So he had some concerns, especially with the job that I chose.
Where were you first stationed?
Berlin, Germany.
What was the hardest part of your initial military training?
I think the hardest part was being away from home for such a long period of time, fresh out of high school. I had never been away from home for that long before. So.
Describe the emotion you felt when you first arrived overseas.
Cautious, but ready to do a job.
Where were you stationed, and what was your initial job?
In Iraq, I was in Camp Rustamaya, which is in southeastern Baghdad. And my initial job was as an infantry squad leader and a sniper section leader.
How long did you serve in Iraq?
For a year.
Did your mission change at all while you were there?
It did. When we first got there, it felt sort of like a peacekeeping mission, but then it became more of a combat role pretty quickly.
What was your experience interacting with the Iraqi people?
Pretty good. For the most part, everyone was thankful that we were there. I was actually surprised at how thankful most people were that we had kind of taken over there and gotten rid of Saddam.
Based on your experience, what was your opinion on our country's military strategy for fighting in Iraq?
While I was there, I think it was pretty good. I think we had a good plan, and we were executing it well, and we were making quite a bit of progress. After we left, I think it started to change a little bit, but I'm not 100% sure on how.
What was the hardest part of your time in Iraq?
I think it was when someone was injured, one of our soldiers was injured or killed.
What was the system for treating wartime injuries?
What we would do is initially we would call a 9-line medevac, which is a 9-part report over the radio to get medical attention there. It's almost similar to calling 911 nowadays. It's just for the military. You need a little more information, and then they would be sent to a field hospital, and from the field hospital they would be sent to further medical care if it was needed.
Were you ever injured?
I was.
What happened?
I was actually chatting on the internet in my room, and I was typing, and a mortar round hit our building, and it exploded in the ceiling and knocked me unconscious. We got lucky. It didn't come through the ceiling and hit inside the room. It actually exploded in the ceiling. So, yeah, so I had a little head injury.
What was an average day like?
Normally, if we didn't have a mission, we'd wake up, do some type of physical training. I used to spend 2 to 3 hours a day in the gym. Eat dinner, depending on when you woke up. So a lot of times we were in reverse cycle, so we were waking up around dinner time. And then they had midnight chow, which was like our lunch. And then in the morning we were eating dinner and going to bed, because we did most of our operations at night. So, yeah, that's kind of a normal day. We'd do some training here and there when we could, and just stay physically fit and ready to go. But on days where there were missions, it just depended on when the mission needed to be done. Sometimes we'd sleep in if we knew we were going to be out late. Being a sniper, sometimes I'd be out for 2 or 3 days at a time, so we'd like to rest up beforehand.
What were some of your missions?
We did a lot of what we called route security. So with route security, what we'd do is we'd set out sniper teams and overwatch a specific road to make sure that the enemy couldn't plant improvised explosive devices on the road or set up ambushes for our vehicles.
What was the most unexpected event that occurred while you were there?
While we were there, we got tasked to do a hostage rescue, which was a little bit out of our scope, being a non-special forces kind of unit. So it was something that the special operations guys were tasked out, and everyone was busy. And the mission landed on my squad's lap, and they conducted it perfectly.
What type of relationship did you have with the other soldiers in your unit?
It's a very close bond. You're closer than, friends. You're basically family. I know, just instinct. I know when one of my guys is hungry just because I know him. I know, all kinds of stuff. So you become really close. You really do.
What was your military rank when you served?
I was a staff sergeant at the end, before I was injured.
Describe the unit you worked in and your role in it.
I was in the 3rd Infantry Division, and like I said, I was a squad leader and sniper section sergeant. So I was in charge of employing sniper teams out into missions.
What was it like being in charge of the other men?
It was a lot of responsibility, but it was great. I had a great group of guys, and they really knew their jobs. So it was a pleasure to work with people so competent.
What unique skills does a soldier need to have in order to succeed in such a harsh environment?
I would say the biggest thing, and it's one of the things you can't really teach, is just being situationally aware, knowing what's going on around you at all times.
What moment are you most proud of from your service overseas?
I would say a particular mission that could have went bad, but we kind of prevented a big catastrophe from happening.
What was that mission?
It was on a route security, where we actually caught some people trying to place an explosive device on the side of the road to, specifically to kill our guys. And we stopped that from happening.
How did you feel when you were put in that position to?
Very scary. It was very, very scary at first. And then, afterwards, when you stop and think about it, it was amazing. We did something great there.
What was the most inspiring thing to you about the Iraqi culture, if there was anything?
I think their resiliency. They've been oppressed for quite a while, and they were under martial law, yet they still functioned on it, doing their daily business, and a lot of bad things were happening with the violence in between the sects of the Muslims, the Sunnis and the Shiites. They were, blowing each other up and all kinds of stuff. So yet they still did their daily routine and just kind of carried on,
When you went to bed at night, were you afraid?
Not really, I don't think I was afraid. We did stay out for multiple day missions out in the middle of Baghdad sometimes, but I didn't really sleep, so I didn't really go to bed.
What was your most memorable experience?
Pretty much the entire year.
As you returned home from Iraq, what were your feelings?
Very nervous. I was toward the end of the deployment. I was probably more nervous to go home than I was to do a combat patrol.
Why were you nervous?
You just, people you haven't seen in over a year. You don't know how to act. You've acted a certain way, for a year, and coming home, you're expected to be a combat soldier one day, and then the next day be a dad or a brother, or it's just completely two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Do you still stay in touch with any of the men from your unit today?
Yeah, lots. We talk almost daily.
Where do they live?
All over the United States, and actually all over the world, because I still know a lot of guys that are in, and they're deployed here and there and stationed overseas.
What did you feel like when you were returning home and there were still men fighting over there?
I wanted to be there to help out, even though it was our time to go back. A lot of guys felt the same. They wanted to stay.
What were the main challenges interacting with friends and family when you returned?
Just, the way you talk to each other as soldiers and the way you talk to people you care about, it's completely different. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges.
Was your father proud of you when you returned, since he had also been in the military?
Absolutely, yeah.
What was his reaction to?
They threw a big party for me when I got home at the American Legion Hall.
Looking back on your entire military career, would you have done anything differently?
No, I don't think so.
Do you miss anything about being part of the military?
Every day.
What do you miss most about it?
The brotherhood. Yeah, it's just a family. You're part of something important, and I would go back tomorrow if they called and said, "Hey, we need you."
How did your experience in war impact you as a person? What did you learn from it?
I learned that life is precious, and that a lot of little things don't matter.
Would you consider your time in the military a positive or negative experience?
I'd say it was absolutely positive.
What advice would you give to a high school student who are considering a career in the military?
I would say do well in school, study hard. It does help you out in the military. Focus on math.
What do you miss most about being part of the military?
I would say the brotherhood, the camaraderie.
When you came home, did you feel supported by the American public?
Absolutely. When we got off the airplane in the airport at Atlanta, everyone was cheering. Every terminal we walked by, everyone was cheering and clapping. It was really cool.
How did your emotion change from when you first arrived to when you were coming home?
Well, when we first arrived in Iraq, we were, pretty cautious about what was going on. And then when we got home, everyone was just kind of relieved and kind of ready to take a break, you know.
What frightened you most while you were over there?
Roadside bombs. You know, I'd say that's one of the largest causes of the casualties in my unit when we were there.
What did you have to do as a squad leader?
I ran a squad of myself and 8 other individuals, and we basically were an infantry squad, which is we're the combat guys. We're like, a squad's kind of like a SWAT team. You know, you do kind of the same thing as, like, you know, it's a general comparison, I guess, would be like a SWAT team kind of. You know, we search houses and that kind of thing. And as the sniper section sergeant, I had 3 sniper teams of 2 men that would, we would emplace the sniper teams in Overwatch in support of bigger missions that were going on, just to, have some type of what we call a combat multiplier.
Why did you choose to be in the Army instead of the other branches of the military?
Well, my father was in the Army, and looking at what I wanted to do, there was really only two choices. It was either the Marine Corps or the Army. And I actually went into the Marine Corps first, went into the Marine Corps recruiting office first. And it all came down to the recruiter. He just wasn't very friendly to me. And, I walked outside, and the Army guy was like, are you joining the Marines? And I said, well, I'm thinking about it. And he said, come on in and talk to me. And I ended up joining the Army.
Can you describe what the training was like before you went overseas?
Sure. Pretty intense. We did a couple rotations to different places to do specific training for Iraq. We went to the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, California, which is a desert, and we conducted operations there. And we also went to JRTC in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and we conducted missions there, which they set up the same style bases that we were staying in Iraq, and we did missions out of there like we would over there. It was pretty intense, but it was very, very accurate training to what we saw when we were over there.
Do you remember what your first mission was?
I do. It was Overwatch of route predators in Iraq, which was a road that had previously been impassable due to enemy activity. And within the first couple weeks we were there, we opened it and cleared it for U.S. forces to use. So that was the first mission that I did, was Overwatch of that route.
Mm-hmm. What did you like most about being in the military?
I liked being part of the team, and of course you always, the guys on your left and right they're your brothers forever,
What was it like having a father who was in the military?
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and I like the fact that my father didn't really force anything upon me. He actually probably didn't push the military at all, but it was something I chose, most likely because he didn't push it on me. He just let me make that choice on my own.
What are your favorite stories about being in the military and serving overseas?
Favorite stories, I would say, are a couple, of well, it's hard to say. It's hard. There's so many, There were, the 365 days we were over there, there's literally 365 stories that could be told.
What was your most memorable story?
Um, I would say it was during the day before the Iraqi elections, the referendum vote, which was a huge milestone in Iraq. We were out on the road. There was a imposed curfew, so no one was supposed to be on the road. And we were sitting on top of one of the vehicles talking, and it was a no man's land. You didn't see anybody outside. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, between where I was and the driver of the vehicle, and we were sitting on top of a Bradley fighting vehicle, this shot rang out and the bullet went right between both of us. We just heard the zoop, pow, off to the side right between us. And we both fell off of the sides of the vehicle just backwards and landed on the ground and got up behind the vehicle. And the funniest part was our first reaction was to look at each other and start laughing. It seems completely ridiculous, but we both just looked at each other and started laughing and got back in the vehicle, of course.
What was the most surprising thing being overseas and fighting in war?
The fact that it's not intense all the time. There's really a lot of downtime, and then there's times when things are very, very hectic, and but there is a decent amount of downtime where it's not always pressure.
Were you associated with other men fighting, or just the men in your unit?
We worked together with a lot of different units. We worked with in support of the special operations guys and other units that were near where we were in Iraq. We coordinated efforts with them to do searches and things like that.
What was it like? Like, what was your living situation like in Iraq? What was it?
We had a kind of a barracks room. It was the room was about 20 by 20, and we had 5 guys living in each one. And we had bunk beds, but we didn't have a person sleeping over you, so you had a bunk bed all to yourself. So you could kind of make a little cubby hole out of it, and we would hang curtains on the bunk beds, so that way when we were sleeping during the day, if somebody had to be up, we could just kind of keep it dark in our little area and sleep during the day.
What was the system of communication like? How did you know when you had to be somewhere? Or
So normally in the Army you get a warning order. A warning order is part of an operations order. So when you get the warning order, it says, hey, be ready to do this at this time, and the briefing is at this time. So then we would go to the briefing, and then we would get the entire mission. So it would come down the chain of command. So the captain would brief the lieutenant, who would brief the platoon sergeant, who would tell us when the warning order was, or tell us when the op order was, and then we would go get our operations order and then conduct the mission.
how long did the longest mission you had last?
4 days.
What was that like? What was that mission?
We were actually in the tennis courts of the Baghdad Olympic Stadium in the stands. And we were just overwatching a route, and we kind of just got stuck there for a long time. There was a lot going on. So.
When you hear the word war, what first comes to mind?
World War II movies.
When you were 13 and you wanted, when you first became interested in the war, what did you think it would be like?
I thought it would be more like what you see on TV, but it's not even close. Like I said, it's not always intense. We see on TV, we see specific battles or this or that, but there's a lot of other things that go on in between the chaos.
What did you do when you weren't fighting, like when you didn't have a mission?
Spent a lot of time in the gym. and a lot of time prepping, preparing for our next mission, and a lot of time kind of trying to figure out what the next mission would be and what special considerations we had to take to prepare for what was coming up.
When you were planning for that, were you in charge of organizing the men to talk about it?
Yeah, what I would do is organize them and conduct the training pretty much myself, unless it was some kind of special event. Then it would be a larger group, but 90% of the time it was me and my team leaders training the rest of the squad.
And how many men were in a squad again?
9 men, with myself included.
Do you have any mementos or anything from the war at home that remind you of what you did over there?
I do. I have I used to have an arm band, kind of like you see NFL quarterbacks using, and I would write down specific information about a mission on there that I could flip open and look at while I was, out running the mission. And I used to wear that, and I found it in a box one day, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this, So, yeah, I have a couple things like that I still have.
What was your specific uniform while you were over there? Did you have one?
Yep, we were wearing the older desert camouflage uniform that's now obsolete, but that was the one we wore before 2005.
What was the hardest thing about adjusting back to regular life when you returned?
Being on a normal schedule, actually being able to sleep every night and during the night was particularly hard to adjust to.
How long did it take to get used to that, or are you still not used to that?
No, I'm okay now. It took a couple months though. It was tough. When your sleep rhythm's upset, it takes a while to get that back, but it's okay now.
Mm-hmm. What was your most influential mission that really made you realize what was going on and
I would say it was a mission where we were searching door to door, and we came across a large cache of weapons and explosives, and we had 5 or 6 prisoners, and we had to interrogate those prisoners on the spot, which interrogate's a strong word, just basically say, where do you have any other weapons? Do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have any caches of money or explosives or ball bearings or whatever it was, and they sometimes would tell you where things were. This particular mission, they said, we don't have anything, but one of my guys found a buried cache in the backyard, and we opened it up and found a lot of stuff. A lot of higher echelon people came to that mission, and it became a big deal, and I got to see a lot of the bigger picture during that. Yeah.
What was the most challenging thing when you first arrived overseas?
The most challenging thing, I would say, was dealing with some of the soldiers' problems back home. That was probably the most challenging thing, because communications back home it wasn't like you could just pick up the phone and call at any time you wanted to. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't work at all. So if soldiers had a problem back home, it was a lot harder to take care of those problems than it would have been if we were just on the base back in Georgia or wherever we were,
If your daughter came to you one day and said that she was interested in being a part of the military, what would you tell her? What advice would you give her?
If you're going to do it, go all the way. Yeah, don't do it halfway. You know, you're either all in or don't do it at all.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
I don't think so. Just thank you for inviting me to do this.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.